Well, good morning. We're happy to see everybody here this morning. I am going to be more the technical side of this, and we'll be telling you the ins and outs of what to look for, what is ASR, what causes it, and what can you do about it. Um, as Dave mentioned, we have a firm McIntyre Inc. By the way, Dave went to SMU, and my grandson is now attending SMU, so we've got a good tie there. So pool cancer, it used to be that when realtors would go out, and we get questions on this multiple times a week. When realtors went out to show a house and there was a pool, people said, "Oh boy, we got a pool." Now you go out and there's a pool and they're like, "Oh boy, there's a pool." Are we buying a pig in a poke? Are we buying a problem? What do we tell people? What do we look for? What is what are the ramifications of having a pool uh, in your yard? So first thing is, what is ASR? It is alkali silica reaction. And this is a reaction between the materials in concrete that occur after the concrete has cured and it's hard, and it expands and cracks the concrete from the inside out. So kind of like freezing a water pipe, it'll crack the pipe. So this is a common one. I've got some pictures we'll see as we go through here, but the common what's called spider web cracking, where you get a series of cracks all over the pool. And ASR is a chemical reaction between the aggregates around here, the active aggregates, alkali metals, which are in the cement products, and water. Those three items combine to form concrete. So when the alkalis have silica, I mean, sorry, when the aggregates have silica in them, the chert rock around here has a lot of silicon dioxide in it. It combines with the hydroxides in the cement paste and it forms a gel in the presence of moisture, it forms a gel inside the pore space of the concrete and starts to expand. This is the sort of thing that you can expect to see. This one is actually a highway department picture of a retaining wall. The ASR is not limited to just swimming pools. It can occur in all sorts of things. It can occur in house foundations, but it very seldom does for the main reason that you've got a plastic sheet under the foundation, which prevents water from migrating up into the slab, hopefully, if it's done right. And you've got a climate controlled atmosphere above it with air conditioning and heating, so it just doesn't get very wet. So this is what you see when you start to see ASR in pools. You get this map cracking or spider web cracking. Another indication is it almost looks oily around the edges of the cracks, and you may start to see an amber colored material oozing from the cracks. That is the gel that's being squeezed out from the cracks.
Hey, John,
Yeah.
I know that in many of my cases, I don't necessarily see the amber color. It's primarily white. It almost looks like, some chemical reaction, like you put detergent in your pool and it's stuck to the side of the pool. Uh,
It absolutely is. And this is in more advanced cases. When you're earlier stages of it, you will not see the amber part. If you get to this part, this is advanced ASR here. But what you're talking about, Dave, is these white
right.
streaks here that you see. And what that is calcium carbonate. So that you've got calcium hydroxide, which is basically lime in the cement that is soluble. So when water gets to it, it migrates out to the surface, especially when it hits the air. It combines with the CO2 in the air, the carbon dioxide, and forms the calcium carbonate. That's the white stuff, just like stalactites in a cave. Same material. So this is a close-up shot. When you get testing done, you'll have petrographic testing, which is where they slice a very thin little piece off of the core. You take a core sample out of the pool. They slice a thin little piece off and put it under a high-powered microscope. And here these slides are only about a millimeter thick. They're very, very thin, so you can shine light through them. They use polarized light sometimes. But you can see several distinct features of it. This is one of the pebbles. If the difference between shotcrete and gunite is that shotcrete has sand, rocks, and cement, and gunite just has sand and cement. A few additives, but that's the basic. So you don't have these big pebbles in gunite. But you can see this is typically 3/8 is the maximum size. So we're talking about a little teeny rock here that's been blown way up. So then you've got the sand particles, and you can see those how small they are in comparison to the rocks. This is an important difference between gunite and shotcrete. This is some of the ASR gel that's forming here. Here's some more that's starting to form over on this edge. Now, part of this whole crack was filled up with that white ASR gel when they saw these with a water saw, diamond water saw, and it's so thin that it dissolves out some of the ASR. So this whole crack, you can see some remnants here where there was ASR, but this whole crack looked like this before they did the sawing. So here you can see that another crack is starting to form. This is water has gotten through some little interface in the rock. This happens all throughout your concrete, and that expands little by little, and it cracks the whole piece. So this is a core sample. You take a core bit and you drill out typically a 3 inch by 6, 8 inch piece of the pool shell out of the walls and floors, and you take a look at it. So this is the crack that you would see from the top, like those first pictures we looked at. This would be what's visible to the top. Sometimes it'll go all the way through. Sometimes it stops some depth into it. Um, at this particular one, there's an interface layer here where there was a difference in texture, probably when they changed trucks or something like that, which is not um, detrimental to the concrete. And you can see down here, there's a little gray stripe. So that was probably another truck change. But you can see a few of the little white spots. Even sometimes when you're holding the sample in your hand, unaided by microscopes or anything else, you can start to see little white dots. This can be one of several things, but a lot of times it's ASR. And then you can see they've outlined them. They took a red pen here and they drew over all the little micro cracks in here. And you can see how many there are. So that this is not just one crack, it's all throughout the whole sample. It's literally just like cancer destroying your concrete from the inside out.
John, do you sometimes find that when you drill core samples, that you may have one core sample that has indications of ASR while you may have other core samples that don't? Is that unusual?
Absolutely, you can get that. Where you have cracks, you're most likely to see it. So when we're trying to test for ASR, we always make sure that we get like two of the four samples at least where there are cracks, because that crack is a water avenue. Remember that triangle, one of the three things you need to promote ASR is moisture. So you will see that. Now, if you go drill it somewhere else in the pool, you may or may not find ASR. It can be, you know, uh, it may not have developed all the way over. With time, it probably will, but most of the time we're looking at a 2 to 5 year span after construction, and it hasn't had time to spread all the way. That being said, too, you are most likely to find ASR in almost any concrete sample you take, but very, very small amounts, not enough to be detrimental. So that's why it's important to get the testing done, because the labs know how to look at this and judge whether it is an ongoing, it's going to be a problem, or it's not. So here's the three things you need to support ASR. You've got to have the reactive aggregate. You've got to have alkali ions from the cement. And some of the cement around here that's limestone based is very alkaline. You need a pH over 12 to support ASR growth, and you need moisture. You don't have to have wet water saturating the whole thing. Just high humidity is sufficient. So if you remove, just remember this triangle, if you remove any one of these, the reaction stops. Now, you can't take the aggregate out of rock. You can't take the cement out of rock because you have nothing to hold it together. So what most people do is try, when they're building pools, is try and limit the water infiltration. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But the question comes up, when did all this start? Well, in 2016, the EPA passed the Clean Air Act, which had the goal of eliminating carbon from the atmosphere, reducing it. It was very strict on coal-fired power plants, which caused a lot of them to change from coal to gas for their energy source. So by doing that, the fly ash is a byproduct of the coal burning. It pretty much disappeared from the market. So why is that important? Well, because fly ash is the prime additive to concrete to eliminate or prevent ASR formation. It was a waste product. It was almost given away. It was very cheap. It was very easy to use. And it had other added benefits. It would make your concrete more less pervious, more impervious. It would increase the strength, and it tied up some of the alkali ions so they could not react and form ASR. So it had multiple benefits. So what happened is it takes typically about 2 to 3 years for ASR to develop after construction. So after the act of 2016, it was like 2017 or thereabouts, some of the plants started changing over to gas. Took fast forward about 2, 3 years, so around late 2019, early 20, pools started seeing cracks. Well, pools can get cracks in them for a variety of reasons. So they were simply repaired as a simple crack and went on. But as it got further into 2020, you'd notice you repair a crack, couple months you went back, there was a new crack. Couple months you went after that, you went back, there was another crack. You couldn't keep up with the repairs. So by late 20, early 21, people were realizing this is something other than just simple pool cracking. That's not what we're dealing with here. The question comes up, is this a problem only in Austin? Because Austin is kind of the hot spot of the nation for ASR right now. But it occurs, as you can see, these little stars on the map, it occurs all over. Now, they found it in Dallas. They don't have it, I mean, in Austin, of course, but they found it in Dallas, San Antonio, and Houston as well. There have been cases reported there now. This map was a little bit out of date. But it also occurs on the East Coast, New England, Virginia, Washington, D.C. area. Then you get into the Southeast and into the Midwest. There's cases there. And then you get into the Southwest and the West Coast. There's cases there. The good news is if you live in Montana or North Dakota, you probably don't have ASR. But it's so cold up there, not very many people build pools either.
So, John,
So,
one of the questions I have my clients say is this is it a issue of the quarry where the rock is? If you don't have highly reactive aggregate, uh, can you still build with that without the fly ash?
yes, the answer is yes, but you want to test your materials, and we're going to get to that in a minute. Um, but from the quarries, in a given quarry, you can have spots that vary from good to bad aggregate. The depths can vary from good to bad because this is all stuff. Most of the aggregates in Austin come from the quarries along the Colorado River between Austin and Bastrop. There's a whole series of quarries there that they mill these out of. Um, the material was carried down by the Colorado River over, eons of floods and got deposited. So depending on where the rain was and what it washed down the river, you get active or less active layers. There's a whole testing matrix that we're going to talk about in a minute that you can go through to see what that is. But so how do you know if you have ASR? Well, you look for the spider web cracking. That's one of the most prominent. This particular pool right here was only about between a year and a half and 2 years old, and it's one of the worst cases of cracking that I've seen. You can see this is the white efflorescence that Dave was talking about before, that you see oozing out of the cracks. This is, I think it's less the ASR gel than rusting. This is where a pipe came through the wall that wasn't well sealed. Water got onto the rebar, it rusted, and it washed through. These were one that I went out and looked at, and the cracks are fine when they start out. They get bigger as time goes on, but I chalk them so that people can see them in the pictures. But you look for delamination, in other words, pieces falling out. You'll get little chunks of the plaster coming off. Spalling is much the same thing. Look for soft material. If you knock it with your finger, something hard, does it sound hollow or does it have a nice firm ring to it? The extrusions we've already talked about, and the age of the pool. This is very important. I get calls from people with pools say, hey, my pool's only 6 months old. I've got a crack in it. I think I have ASR. And I have to tell you, that is in all likelihood not ASR because it doesn't form that fast. It generally takes 2 to 5 years. There's some outliers. Some can be a little sooner, some will take longer, but that's kind of the sweet spot in the Central Texas materials. The other thing is shotcrete versus gunite. And we talked about this a little earlier, the difference. Gunite is just sand and cement. Shotcrete is sand, cement, and rocks. Gunite almost never has ASR. It's very, very few and far between. It's not zero probability, but it's pretty darn close. So, as I mentioned, this is why you want to seal your penetrations, and the chalk lines have been enhanced.
So,
So
John, on that last topic, if someone, a client of one of the realtors attending today is thinking about putting in a pool, would you recommend or give serious thought about using only gunite rather than shotcrete?
yes, I would. If you can't, there are some tested methods that you can use, and some of the pool suppliers are having the materials tested about once a month to make sure that they are not reactive, which is a requirement of one of the standards we'll get to in a minute. Um, those are probably pretty safe to use, especially if you get, and you can still get fly ash. Just because we're not burning coal here, you know where they're burning tons of it, like about 7 times as much as the US, is China. So you can get it imported in. So now it costs about the same as cement to replace some of the cement product, whereas it used to be almost free. But it can still be done effectively. You need to make sure your builder is up to date on ASR and is taking the proper precautions and adding the proper elements. Gunite or ASR, I mean, gunite or shotcrete, either one is perfectly acceptable if it's done right. The question is if. If you cannot guarantee that, then I would say yes, by all means, use gunite because it's much, much, much less likely to have ASR even if you don't add fly ash to the mix. It's not 0%, but it's pretty close. So, as I mentioned, it's a slow process in development. It takes about 2 to 5 years because of the chert rocks around here is the main ingredient. If your pool is less than 2 years old, it's unlikely to be ASR. Not absolutely, but most likely it's not ASR. I have, in looking at I mean, I've looked at well over 100 pools with ASR. I don't think I have seen any of them start to form longer than 5 years out. They've all been before 5 years. Doesn't mean it can't happen. In some parts of the country where you have different aggregates, it can take up to 10 years for ASR to show up. But around here in the Central Texas area, the sweet spot's about a 2 to 5 year after construction for it to show up.
And then, John, also in terms of the crack, the identification of what the cracks look like, if you have a long, linear, deep crack on a bench, um, is that something that when you see that you automatically think ASR, or are you thinking maybe settlement or movement of the steel? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, if you just see a singular crack or maybe one or two, especially if they're long and fairly straight, it's probably, not always, but probably not ASR. It can be movement, like if a pool settles to one side and it bends, what it's trying to do is open at the top, or if it's trying to heave, it opens at the bottom. You'll see a crack that's narrower at the top, wider at the bottom, or vice versa, running up the wall. On the seats, very often you will see cracks where the seat joins the main wall of the pool. This can be because they didn't do the reinforcing correctly. They didn't put enough reinforcing in there because thicker concrete shrinks more. There can be different reasons for that. But what you're looking for ASR is that random cracking over the surface, not a well-defined linear crack that occurs in one area. And if you've got it, I mean, the way these work, you bring the truck in, they start working around the pool and they spray around. You're not going to have it in just one spot. You probably got it all over. And sooner or later, it's going to show up. As you mentioned earlier, if you've got cracks, that lets more water in, that accelerates the process of the crack. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist elsewhere in the pool. It just hasn't shown up yet. So, as we mentioned, the difference between, and now we're talking about this, between gunite and shotcrete. Gunite just has sand, and you can see how small the sand particles are compared to the rocks. Shotcrete, which is technically wet, it's shotcrete is pneumatically applied concrete, and there's wet process, which everybody calls gunite, where the materials are delivered through the tube wet. They're mixed in a cement truck like you commonly see running around, and they're shoved through the tube wet and they're pressured out at the nozzle. The advantage to that is that it has a very consistent mix from batch to batch because these are all done back at the yard where things are carefully weighed, measured, the moisture is noted and all that. Gunite, however, is brought in one of these like the custom crate trucks where you have several bins in the back of the truck. The material is all dry. It's mixed there at the truck. It's got a little auger at the back that mixes it up. it is pushed down the tube dry and it is mixed with water and air at the nozzle to blow it out. This means the nozzleman is controlling the mix. So it's very easy for him to make it too wet, too dry, or get it right. The experience of the nozzle with gunite is very important. So they both have their pros and cons, but like I said earlier, if you can't guarantee the components in your shotcrete, gunite is probably your best bet right now until things get settled out better. So you can see the difference in the surface area in the rock and the little sand particles. It's substantial. If you take a typical 1 millimeter grain of sand and a 3/8 rock, the rock has almost 100 times the surface area. So this is one of the reasons that in gunite, ASR does not progress as well. The surface area for the reaction to occur, because the silicon, remember, is in the aggregate. It can be in the sand or the rock. It's such a small area, it's not enough to get that reaction going and propel it into a larger reaction that really causes you problems. So how do you prevent ASR? Most of the prevention comes on the front end before you build the pool. After you build the pool, we're going to talk about in a minute. But on the front end, what do you want to make sure? If you're about to go out and build a pool, what do you want to look at? Well, you want to control, remember the three things it takes: alkaline environment, reactive aggregate, and water. Control your alkalins. You can now get low alkaline cement that has lower alkalinity than the typical cement. So if you're going to have a full water submerged vessel, this is something you want to look into. Avoid the reactive aggregates. Find out the quarries where this is coming, where their materials are coming from. Have they had any problems in the past? There are some of them around here that are well known. There's one out towards Bastrop, I think it's Bastrop Sand and Gravel, had very bad stuff. TxDOT wouldn't even use them. It was just known to be highly reactive. It can be used for other things, like a sand putting under a sand bed under a sidewalk or something like that. It's fine, but mixing it in the mix, you don't want to use it for that. And eliminating the water exposure. That's the easiest thing to go after. There's all sorts of sealers and things that you can put in to prevent water from infiltrating the mixture. So you use your additives, which we've talked about fly ash, but there can be other things like lithium, barium, other salts that you can add in there that will limit the ASR reaction. Get your materials tested. We're going to talk about that a little bit too, that there's various tests you can do on your aggregates and materials to see if they are in fact bad. But if you want to absolutely drop dead know whether you've got ASR or not, you have a petrographic test done. This is where you take that core sample like we looked at earlier, and you go look at it under a microscope at a testing lab. This is drop dead. They will tell you either you got it or you don't. It's harmful or it's not. Um, the problem is it's expensive. You're probably going to be looking at somewhere in the range of $10,000 by the time you get through the coring, the sampling, the testing, report, and things like that. So it's not something you go into lightly. So this is a typical petrographic slide. Again, we've kind of looked at this. You can see the aggregate. You can see the sand. You can see the cement paste is all the gray stuff. These little dots are little air voids in here. Here's your ASR gel form. It's washed out of the crack again, but you can see it continues back up here. Even this next, and my tag is in the way, but it goes through the next aggregate and it goes. So this is going all through the sample here. And you can see where it's broken this particular sample into four different parts. So testing, what can you do up front? Well, ACI, the American Concrete Institute, has a guideline, ACI 506. In that, it references ASTM C33. This is the American Society for Testing in Materials, C33. Under this, it requires testing of your aggregates for reactivity to water exposed installations like swimming pools. Okay. So you want to see that your pool builder has either 506 or ASTM C33 in their specifications on their plan somewhere, that should be adhered to. You want to be sure that the builder has informed the supplier this needs to be tested material, under these test standards, because a lot of it's not. There's degrees of reactivity. There's like 4 different degrees, ranging from non-reactive to highly reactive. And depending on what aggregates you've got, sometimes it's a problem, sometimes it's not. But you need to know that up front before you get it cast in your pool and it's hardened in place. So this is what C33 reads. Fine aggregate for use in concrete that will be subject to wetting, like a pool, extended exposure to humid atmosphere, contact with moist ground shall not contain any materials that are deleteriously reactive with the alkalis in cement in an amount sufficient to cause excessive expansion of the mortar or concrete. And I left this contact with moist ground. In-ground pools, what is the outside of the pool contact with? The ground. And around here in the summer, it can get dry. You go, well, it's not going to get any moisture in the summer. Well, what about the winter? It's cooler. There's low evaporation. We get rain more. Hopefully, we get rain more often. Right now, we're not getting so much, but you can get it from the outside. When we take core samples, the two areas where we find it most are near the inside surface and the outside surface of the pool. So it starts there and progresses inward. So as I mentioned before, a lot of concrete can have ASR. The key is it enough to be a problem? Okay. Little teeny small amounts like will form in gunite. You'll often see little teeny specks of it in there, but it never grows beyond that, and it's not enough to be a problem. So here's some of the different tests that you can do. This one is very commonly used. It's a 16-day test. They cast, I think it's a 4 inch by 4 inch by, was it 16 or 24 inch long concrete sample. They put it in a bin with a salt environment, very high heat, and they accelerate the whole process for 16 days. If that sample expands more than 0.04%, which is not very much, then it's considered reactive, that those aggregates are going, that things are starting to grow in there. If it's less than that, it's considered acceptable. Now, the problem with the 16-day test, there's lots of false positives. Now, some of those false positive are saying that this is bad material when it's actually good, which means you're being very conservative. But the other false positives are saying you've got good material when it's actually bad. So it's not a 100% guarantee. A lot of the uh, pool builders now are starting to advertise that they're having their materials tested under this test, saying that guarantees that you will not have ASR. It's not an absolute guarantee. It's better than nothing, but it's not an absolute guarantee. So you've got a couple of other tests here that you can look at. This is the most definitive, the 1293, but it's a 2 year, it can be either 1 year or 2 year test. The 2 year test is the most accurate. But who has time to wait 2 years to see if your material, before you start building? That's not going to happen. So these are typically used as kind of a running test, like from the quarries, where they do weekly or monthly samples, and they will keep a running test going. And they'll test it once a year, just as kind of a historical basis of what the quarry has been like. So it can give you some useful information. It's just that for a given pool, who's going to stockpile 2 years worth of material before they use it?
Hey, John, in terms of, if a realtor wants to advise their client, get the core sampling done just from kind of beginning to end, from draining the pool, getting the sample, sending it to the lab, getting the results back. What are you seeing in terms of timing?
It can be anywhere from a couple of months to 8 or 9 months, depending on the load at the time. Um, Last year, it seems to have, it's starting to taper off now. I just had one done, and I'm on my fourth week of waiting for the results, um, which they tell me will be in any day here. So that's with the local lab, Wisjani Engineers, which, by the way, are one of the few testing labs in the U.S. that do test for ASR, and we happen to have them right here in town. So by the time you arrange for the testing, take a day or two to drain the pool down, and it needs to be dry, because what you do is you don't want steel in those samples, so you do a ground penetrating radar scan to locate where the steel is inside the shell, and you drill inside where you avoid the steel so you miss it. You got to get those guys out there, so you need a couple of days to do that. You're gonna have to get the drilling guys out there. That'll take a day. You carry it to the lab. You've got anywhere from, I would allow, from 2 to 6 months, depending on what their load is. So it can be anywhere from a 2 month to a 6 7 month process.
And then what are you seeing in terms of the cost of doing this? I know draining the pool will be several $100s, putting the water back in the pool. What are you seeing kind of as a range for the cost of doing sampling?
Well, and of course, nowadays we're under water restrictions too because the lakes are so low. So you're going to have to fill it back up with probably trucked in water. They're not allowing you to fill pools right now. That's going to cost you in the range of $1,500 to $2,000. Whereas if you could fill it out of the tap, it'd be $200 to $400. By the time you get the coring done in the GPR scan, you're probably looking at a little under $2,000 to get the petrographic testing done. I know here at West Janney, typically you take two cores and have them sampled, plus a report is going to run you in the $6,000 to $7,000 range. So you add all that up, six and two is eight, one's nine. Yeah. And have a couple people out there to coordinate it. You're looking at $10,000 to $12,000 by the time you get through. It's not a cheap test, but it is the main definitive one. They have got some now as a preliminary. There are some dyes that you can put onto the core sample, which will give you an immediate readout and tell you if it's starting or it's progressed. There are some cautions you need to exercise in that, but as a kind of a preliminary test. So if you're having a core test done, you could take one of them and do the dye test on it. That would give you an initial indication if it's ASR or not. Um, a lot of these, you can go out like some of these pictures I've been showing you. There's not much question that they've got ASR, especially if it's one of several suppliers in town. Dave, I think you're going to address this later on, but there's several of the known suppliers that have had problems with ASR. If it's one of those, your chances are pretty good. If it's some of the others, like Custom Crete, I know does they test their materials and they're pretty diligent about it. Texan Concrete does a good job of testing theirs, and I don't think they have had any problems. But most of the big builders have been caught with bad material. And the problem is that they were used to having good material delivered to them that never had any problems. All of a sudden, the fly ash disappeared from the mix, and the suppliers didn't always tell the end users that that had been omitted from the mix. So they thought they were getting the same stuff as previous. And of course, it takes 2, 3 years to find out. So in 2, 3 years, how many pools have you built? Well, if you're doing a couple hundred pools a year, that could be 600 pools potentially that have the possibility, not all of them will get it, but have the possibility that they could get ASR. So it's a problem that kind of ramped up on everybody. It's now known, it's tapered. The complaints of the filings are tailing off. Dave, you can address that more than I can. But it's a problem. So yeah, you need to be well aware of it. So
Hey, John, one of the things you mentioned last on the last class was there's still concrete companies issuing or sending out concrete that's the bad stuff, correct? It's still being used at this point.
yes, um, Easy Mix is one of them. They've claimed that they have changed their aggregate supplier and they're using low alkaline cement. Haven't heard anything about testing on the aggregates, so I don't know if it's still reactive or not. Um, but I would say you're taking your chances with them because they are not putting fly ash in the mix. They are one of the ones never put fly ash in their mix, tried to blame all this on everything but their mixture. And it was clearly that there were problems in their mixture. Um, that being said, not every pool that Easy Mix did developed ASR, but a whole lot of them did. They're one of the prime people involved in litigation in town. So yeah, you need to be aware, and I think Dave is going to address this. Several of the builders and suppliers around here that have had problems with ASR. The thing now is a lot of them have become aware of it. Ask them what they've done to counteract it, what they're using in their materials, and how they're doing their construction. Are they using gunite shotcrete? Are they putting fly ash in? Are they putting some other material in? Have they had their aggregate tested? Those are key questions that you want to ask. Other things are that you want to make sure that you've got enough reinforcement. Concrete's wonderful in compression, it's horrible in tension. Steel's great in tension. They happen to have the same coefficient of expansion and they work very well together. So the steel resists the tension that pulls apart the cracks, whereas the concrete holds the compression together. The placement of it, if you've got one or two mats of steel, if you've got a 12-inch thick wall of concrete. A lot of builders think, well, I'm giving more concrete, they're going to have a stronger wall. Yes and no. It also shrinks more, and you need that steel within about an inch or 2, 3 inches of the surface to protect it against cracking. ACI, the American Concrete Institute, recommends anything over 10 inches. You have 2 layers of steel, so you've got a layer of steel near each face, the outside and the inside face of the pool. Because remember, in ground pools, you can get moisture from the ground working into the backside of the pool, which will eventually work through the cracks on the pool side, on the water side. Piping, you want all the piping to be outside of the shell and only turn in where it penetrates 90 degrees. If you
Hmm.
put a pipe in the shell, it reduces that thickness effectively because PVC pipe has no strength. So if you've got an 8-inch shell and you've got a 2-inch pipe, which is almost 2.5 inch outside diameter, you've lost something like 35 to 40% of your effective width of the pool. What happens is that all the stress now builds up in that remaining 5 inches rather than the full 8 inches. That's where crack develops, and you'll get a nice straight line that follows that pipe run along the pool. I've seen that many, many times. See, as I mentioned, one of the pictures before, where you were seeing the rust stains come through at the inlet. Seal the penetrations with water stops. They make little rings that will go around the pipe that fit tightly on the pipe and then seal out in the concrete. Reason being, concrete when it cures shrinks, so it will shrink back away from that pipe,
I
and
believe.
it water to start leaking around that pipe into the pool.
Yes, we are.
Use fly ash, pozzolans. Pozzolans, the Romans used to use volcanic ash in their concrete, worked very well. Um, these are elements, they're not
Sure.
themselves, but when they are in the concrete mixture, they
Yeah.
act like concrete.
Yeah.
Somebody's got their mic off here. Um, the water
Equal.
reducing admixtures. What you want to do is not add
In.
more water. Water makes
Oh,
concrete
okay.
mixtures very weak
I
and
was
it makes
typing.
them very
Okay, good.
porous so that water can get into the mixture. Remember, water is one of the three key things that causes ASR to form. So the water reducing admixtures make concrete more flowable and workable without adding extra water. You want a water cement ratio of about 0.43 plus or minus, because that's how much water it takes to fully hydrate all the concrete in the mix. If you end up with a water cement ratio of say 0.6, you're going to have excess water. You'll see bleed water. When it's done, the surface will just be wet with standing water. That's too much water. And what happens is all that water is in the mixture. When it fully dries and evaporates, it leaves little pockets in there. And there's channels, little microscopic channels that water can get into the mix, and it will allow water to get in and cause ASR. There's other things such glass fiber for cracks, sealers and coatings you can use, extended wet curing. Curing is very important. Your water's your friend during curing, afterwards, it's not. So, the things you can ask when you're going to show somebody a house and you are concerned about a pool being there. When was the pool built? How old is it? Is it within that 2 to 5 years? Is it older than 5 years? If it is and doesn't have cracks, chances are you're not going to have ASR. If it's only a year old, you may not have it yet, but that doesn't mean you won't get it if other things are not done right. Who is the builder? Do they have an ASR history? Have they changed suppliers? Are the materials tested? Big one is it shotcrete or gunite? You'd be surprised how many pool builders don't know the difference, and it's very important. Who supplied the shotcrete? There are several known companies that have issues. So find out who your concrete supplier was. And if it's the wet mix, if it's shotcrete, did they include fly ash or some other pozzolan to mitigate ASR formation? And another thing, ask them about their water bills. When you get all these cracks, water leaks through it from the inside out. On an in-ground pool, you may not notice on. One that's above ground, you'll see water oozing out. Have the water bills gone up recently? As you see these cracks, that's an indication. And of course, then the spiderweb cracking, which is classic. So if you have ASR on an existing pool, there is no known cure for it. The only solution is to rip it out and replace it with a new pool. You can put coatings and liners, which will buy you some time. It'll extend the use of the pool, but it is not going to cure ASR. Eventually, it's going to have to come out.
And
So,
John, just a question. Somebody asked in the chat, how do you know what your concrete company is?
find out who the pool builder is, and you'll have to ask them. That's about the only way I know to do it. Um, if they think you've got a problem with your pool, call an engineer who's familiar with pools. Some of them aren't familiar with pools. Very good engineers, but they just don't do pools. Call someone familiar with pools to come look at your pool. They may or may not advise you to perform testing to see if ASR exists. If you're going to get work done, use a pool and hot tub association professional. These guys go to classes, they keep up with this stuff, they're up on the current trends, they know what to do as far as pool building and repairs and other things you might need. You can also go to phta.org. That's the Pool and Hot Tub Alliance. It's the biggest trade association in the US concerning pools. There's a lot of information available to the public there. You don't have to be a member to get to it. There is a frequently asked questions page on there too that will give you more information in depth than I've gone into here, and that's readily available on the page. So that's the end of my part. If you have any questions, you're welcome to call or email me, and I will try to answer your questions. A lot of times I am out of town on a job, so if I don't answer you right away, it doesn't mean I'm ignoring you. It just may take me a couple of days to respond. So with that, I will turn it over to Dave.
Thanks. Thanks, John. We're running a little bit short of time, but I'll hit some of the highlights. But before I do, I've got some friends who wanted me to make sure that you all know that there's a Trek continuing education course, a 3-hour course for this topic specifically. I understand that it's Joni Sheretz with the Agent Course Center that you can contact if you want some more detailed information about some of your obligations under the ethical rules. I believe there's also an Austin Realtor ASR group. I would shout out to them. I know some of the folks that are on that Facebook group, and that is another area of information. We will also, at our firm website, Law Offices of Joel Levine, will create a list of pool builders that are in litigation, that if you know the pool has been built by this particular pool builder, there's at least a very good basis to ask questions about. And then we'll also give you a list of experts. Of course, John is my personal favorite, but there are other experts out there, other testing labs, and some information after this that if you want to go to our website, it'll be available to you. There is an MDL. It's in Travis County. There's about 100 different plaintiffs that are in that particular case. It's not a class action. A lot of people confuse MDLs with class actions, but that lawsuit only involves one supplier, and that's Easy Mix. And the other litigation involved that is currently pending involves a second supplier called Hotcrete. Hotcrete is in bankruptcy. The time to file your proof of claims has already come and gone. So if your seller or your seller, I guess, has not participated in that bankruptcy, it's probably too late to do that. There currently is about to be a plan to distribute the funds in that. So if you find out that there is an ongoing claim involving Hotcrete, I would definitely ask the seller to provide you with that information. John, if we can move on to the next slide. The defendants in these cases, obviously the pool companies, here's a list of some of them. The shotcrete companies that are in litigation right now, at least with my firm, are Easy Mix, Hotcrete, Big Dog, H&H Concrete. We also bring in typically the subcontractors that install the steel, the subcontractors sometimes that actually apply the shotcrete mix, and then builders as well, if the builders are involved. And so those are the typical claims. Unfortunately, homeowners insurance doesn't generally cover this. We've tried that in several cases that I've had. We filed claims with the homeowners insurance. They just generally don't cover workmanship. Insurance with shotcrete suppliers, we're learning, have limited, some have limited policy limits, and the claims and the lawsuits are stacking up. Like in the Hotcrete case, I believe the recent bankruptcy filing indicated that there was 9.5 or over 9 million of insurance, but there was 120 plus million of claims. And so that's what we're finding in some. So what you have to do essentially is build a coalition of potential defendants in these cases to make sure that the homeowner has sufficient funds to rebuild the pool. Strategies, I would suggest, for the sellers, plan ahead, and you really have a big decision to make. Do you test it or do you not test it? Contact your pool builder, find out what their insurance is. If you can get a list of the subcontractors, they generally have insurance. The job, the basic information or the job file will have tickets and information that could be helpful about where did they get the shotcrete? Was it easy mix? Was it hotcrete? Was it one of these? Another strategy is, do you assign any claims related to the pool to the buyer? Would the buyer be willing to take those claims and pursue those claims? And then obviously disclose the claims. But right now the strategies, I've had several clients remove the pool and have done that as well as an option. Now on the other side, for the buyers, it's do your homework, investigate, ask for the evidence, ask for leak tests, contracts with their pool builder, when the pool was installed. You can obviously drain and inspect, do the tests that we've talked about. Unfortunately, I think one of the comments was, how do I do that in the option period? I don't know. That's the quick answer is there's no way to get a petrographic exam done within that 2-week window. I think you're just going to have to look at other signs and evidence of ASR and then make negotiate appropriately, because there's no way to get that done. Currently, we're seeing a lot of the cost of repair with the demo being anywhere from 1.5 to 3 times the cost of the original pool. So if you're looking at how big this issue is going to be, you want to see how much it costs to do that. Crystal ball, eventually, yes, this will pass. Things are changing, even though there are some suppliers that are providing the mixture, the shotcrete. Most have taken steps to take care of that. There's been too much exposure of this issue. I was speaking to another colleague who said that there have been efforts in the legislature to ensure that concrete used for pools meets certain standards. There have been bills filed in this legislative session, and just they haven't passed. They're stuck in committee right now. But document the shotcrete used, hire experts, and rely upon them to help navigate this problem.